I'd like to call to order the Ways and Means Committee special meeting on October 22nd. Kelly, could you please call the roll?
Chairwoman Sims is absent. Alderman Gould?
Here.
Alderwoman Tice?
Here.
Alderman Erger?
Here.
3 members represent a quorum.
Next on the agenda is approval or amendment of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes to the agenda? Assume it's approved by acclamation. A report of chair and committee chair and alderman, Alderman Gould.
No report.
I have no report. Alderman Erger.
No report.
And on through, there is no city administrator report, and there are no department reports. So we'll come upon the consent agenda. There are meeting minutes from July 9th and August the 1st. Did you all have a chance to review them? Any changes? Assume that they'll be approved by acclamation? Okay. Then we'll move on to old business. Back to the budget. I did have a request to move information technology to first. So Larry, you're on. I know.
He who has information has the power.
There we go. There it is.
Did it come up?
It's over
There
here.
it is. All right. How are you guys?
Good.
Good.
So this is the fiscal year 2025 IT budget, what we've submitted for approval. This is our list of accomplishments this year in fiscal year 24. We've put some badge access in the finance department area, City Hall. We deployed a new basically picture capturing, image capturing station and badge printing system in HR for our employee ID badges. We assisted the police department with the new scheduling and time management platform. Thank you. Where were we? All right, scheduling and time management platform in the police department. We migrated the Rec Track platform in Parks and Rec over to their cloud-based platform instead of on-prem this year. We finished up some fiber networking in the new Brentwood Park, and it popped up again.
You'll see it. It's just.
We had to replace the video surveillance server at the rec center.
Yeah, we have this one
Yeah.
right here. So.
try this again. Basically, this is the list of the projects that we implemented in fiscal year '24. I believe I was at the Flock LPR cameras there towards the bottom. Police had 3 more deployed this year of the Flock license plate recognition cameras. Um, A planned project is to get badge access in the new Public Works building that was purchased. We've already did a walkthrough and assessed it and have pulled together pricing and shared it with something with badge access there. We deployed a new endpoint detection and response platform, CrowdStrike, this year. It replaced our traditional antivirus software that we had before. And then some power distribution units and our annual network security audit and ongoing end-user cybersecurity training. Next page here is just some of our operating expenses. We budget out of the utilities fund. We budget for basically all connectivity and television services in the city and all facilities. That's what that one's for. And then the IT repair and maintenance account, it's to repair and maintain IT equipment. It's a lot of it is for unplanned throughout the year, and that's where we fund those type of repairs out of.
Can I interject here for a second? Kelly, the screen says that we're in practice session. Are we? Sorry.
This is our computer replacement plan throughout the city. I have it broke down here by each department and the corresponding account numbers. But ultimately, up front, we gave a 5-year life cycle to desktops and laptops, and a 7-year life cycle to printers. We will reach out, talk to those individuals who are up in the life cycle. Sometimes we push them, sometimes we got to change the configuration a little bit if it's not meeting. Wow.
Microphone really bad. Put this one out. I don't know how it's
The noise gate is
So yeah, when the HVC comes on, it kind of cuts out the voice, which is not great. That new powerful HVAC system we have.
It does stay cool, though.
back on. But this one is. Oh, they have
That's right. All right. Yeah, let me know that it sounds all right. So the computer replacement life cycle, we base it on those years on the devices. Most devices are replaced on that life cycle, short of special situations that might come up. And let's see. This is our contractual expenses. The IT budget does account for all software subscriptions, contracts, maintenance, and all departments in the city are planned out of this line item, and I have it broke down there by department so you can kind of see which department makes up that total portion. I did on these slide decks, if it's helpful at all, put page numbers on where it's found at in the budget book. These are our capital improvement projects for fiscal year '25 that we're submitting. Let's see, various reasons here, but the first one, the surveillance server in Public Works, we do assign a 7-year useful life to those. That's kind of twofold. That's usually when servers start having issues and causing outages, and plus the Avigilon software that's running on that server becomes unsupported. The Avigilon is the surveillance platform that we use here in the city. The UPS, the uninterruptible power supply in the network closet at Public Works, it is 7 years old as well. There's a good chance we'll probably just replace the battery and not the whole UPS here. But that's that line item. Our annual network security audit, if you don't remember, we basically self-assess 2 years in a row, and then every third year, we pay for a third-party firm to come in and do a cybersecurity audit on our network. This is a self-assessment year, so the dollar item for that one is much less. We took an inventory of city-owned cell phones. We're starting to get quite a few that are over 3 years old at this point, and we were budgeting just to replace the cell phones that have been over 3 years old at this point. Most of those cell phones, our contract with Verizon gives us upgrades or very cheap upgrades after 2 years, so they'll all fall within that range, anything that's 3 years old or older. There's 3 doors here at City Hall that remain that are not on badge access. One of them's the door over here to the old fire department bays. There's actually 2 of them, an external one and an internal one. And I believe the other one's by Bola's office, right out here going into the city manager's office, does not have badge access on it. The city firewall, again, we place a lot of our equipment based on expected or useful life. Some of it's hardware. This particular one, firewall, we use FortiGate firewalls. They're a Fortinet product, and basically the version goes unsupported every 6 years, and that's why they're on the list to be upgraded this year. And then the UPS and the in-row cooling units, the data center at the police department was implemented, I believe, in 2014. It was before my time here. But at 10 years, we start to look for some of the utility type infrastructure in there to have issues. And this particular thing, we will have a vendor come in, we'll have a vendor test, we'll have a vendor make a recommendation if it's something we need to replace this year, or is it something we could push an additional year. But those are both 10 years old in the city's main data center, which is at the police department. And then there's this replacement fund that, at least initially, a couple projects got moved to there. One of them, I'll let Chief Spees represent, but it's the body cam and the dash cam system. And the one that I guess falls more on to the information technology piece of it is the city's phone system. The city's phone system was deployed in 2012, so next year in 25, it'll be 13 years old. And even though we're still able to get best effort support on it, we can't even buy replacement hardware or desk phones for it. We're buying them secondhand off places like Amazon and eBay when things break in that phone system. And so it's past its useful life basically for that reason. That's the end of my presentation, unless there's any questions.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
Do other people have questions? Okay. So first, I just thank you for commenting on the IT replacement policy and for addressing that in your presentation and in the responses to questions I had earlier. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Okay.
So we actually we seem to be the last few meetings that we have here have better support help from the St. Louis TV folks. But do your other cities have regular issues with like getting a presentation from a laptop to a screen for everyone to see? Because pretty much at every single meeting, we wait.
I would say no. The meetings that I don't attend the Richmond Heights board meetings, but I do attend the Clayton board meetings. And the assistant city manager and the clerk actually run the meetings there. So I think some of it was them being familiar with the system. And I'm hoping with STL TV of getting someone who is more familiar with the system and is more actively engaged in the meetings is will go a long way with it. But what I just saw here with the click, we use these same click share devices in both Clayton and Richmond Heights as well. And those issues I've never seen happening.
Well, this was like so quick compared to most meetings.
Yeah.
So this is not to, anyway, I don't want to criticize you. I think this is, this was great, but I didn't know if this was a system that we need to think about putting into the capital budget for the next few years, because it does happen at every meeting. Or if there is some better way to do this that we need to think about for the future, not this budget, but might be something for the future.
So we deployed this in 2018. It's one of the first bigger projects we did when we came here. And Schiller's Audio Video here in town are the one that did the project. They're actually the one that did City of Clayton and City of Richmond Heights audio video as well. So I kind of think it's twofold. There's a lot of complexity into this system where if the end user are, in this case, STL TV, aren't really up on how things work, they struggle throughout the meeting. So anyhow, I think the system's complex, but when I look, we deployed the City of Richmond Heights in 2021 or 22. It's literally the same technology that we used when we deployed there, for the most part, like these click share device. It's barcode click share. It's the exact same model even that we use there. So, but I know it's an ongoing issue here. We've had Schillers come in many times. We've had people from IT here to try to witness it, which I know I just did.
Yeah.
It's something we can definitely look at. It's not a cheap system. Historically, we live on life cycles. We give a 10-year useful life is what we've given to every other audio video system we've deployed. So, it'd be a little early in that regard, but I guess I'm not above of doing some different vendors coming in and making suggestions and putting something in the budget. I mean, even at 10 years, we're only 3 years away from that, considering next year's 25.
Well, certainly I don't want to add more to, I'm not suggesting doing it early, and I think we do need to have things go their full useful life, but this just seems a problem. And if there's ways, and maybe with new staff from STL TV, it will help solve the issue, but it does seem an ongoing issue.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me interjecting on that, I mean, as the communications chair, that is something that we continually have feedback on or an issue with, in that, our residents don't want to take the time a lot of times to come to a meeting and sit through it, but they do want to hear, they either want to live stream or see it on YouTube. And a lot of times we have so many audio problems, like you just had, where they can't hear anything the person's saying. So it's a visual, it's the audio and visual, some disconnect there. I know that wireless is always riskier, but even if, as we look into hardwiring or something that can have some more reliability, I think is a thing that we need to, whether it's in this budget or in the future budgets, if it's even the replacement is, from a life cycle standpoint, is 3 years out, then that should show up in our 5-year plan. I mean, things like the phone system that's in here, I'm just curious why it never showed up in the 5-year plan. I didn't see it.
Yeah, is what it was. It was a different account, but I saw your comment on the email, and I went and pulled my previous year's budget, and it's been in there every year under a different account number, though.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Sure on that one.
Got it.
But no, I agree. It should be in there right now, and it's not.
Okay.
28.
Sounds like something that we should be adding. And then the last question I have is, I sort of said this last year, that you have a budget that we have a hard time like diving into, because it's like, oh yeah, this is IT and this is how much a server costs and this is what we need.
Yep.
But I don't know if it's worthwhile over the next year to look at those department numbers, and some of them were large, and if the appropriate committee should be looking at what the technology uses are, and sort of get a handle on what those are, because these are big numbers for the city, and we don't really oversee this as I feel like we should. So that might be something to look to do over the next year, so at next year's budget, we have a better understanding of,
I assume you're talking about that contractual account?
like, all
which
those,
had
all
very
the,
large
the
numbers.
4601, 6210, the IT contractual
Yeah,
expenses.
and everything that's in there exists, there's nothing new being requested there. And I guess my only comment on it is if you do away with something there, you're literally getting rid of a service in one of the departments. There's like not a new service that we're putting into that account. That is existing services, that's just the annual maintenance. Rec Track is in there. Actually, it's not in that one. It's in Stormwater Fund, but.
Blackbaud, the financial
Blackbaud
system.
is in there, the financial system.
God.
Basically, any of those, board docs is in there, any of those platforms that the departments use. I guess I just wanted to point out that those aren't like new requests.
Right.
And I have no problem having a meeting, and I will need a lot of support from the departments to do that, because they're gonna be able to support those platforms better than I can. I just kind of get them all centralized into this contractual, into the contractual account for the budget, but they're gonna be the ones that can support it, the why is it needed, and be able to answer your questions. I won't be, other than there is an IT section in there, other than the IT section, I won't be able to talk towards a lot of those contractual accounts without help from the departments.
Anyone else have thoughts?
I would like to just sort of add that Larry sends an extensive itemized listing to the team, mainly to Bola, Erica, and myself, to review, to make up these requests. So with the phone system and everything else, you don't get the itemized list, but if he's got one sheet, he's got 15. There is an extensive itemized list of where we're looking at the data and sifting through the data and asking those types of questions before it ever gets to here. We just tried to consolidate the data. But on page 185, towards the end where it has the IT number with the 121,000, it was closer to 257. We did unravel the phone system out of it as we were sort of reviewing it and finding that the phone system was attached to the asset list and therefore potentially saving for the replacement of it, and not necessarily the rest of those projects were associated with that. But it is a really extensive itemized listing.
Well, I
if
guess
that's
I just-
something you would like to see.
Yeah, well, and maybe it's just an assurance that, like, we're looking at board docs, and that board docs is the most efficient and best and most cost-effective program to use for this. And we don't need to review everything every year, but I know that there's some really expensive things in there. And, is all 143,000 in the admin budget for IT contractual, what are those? And
That's this partnership that
Well,
we
I-
have with,
With some of that is in there, but I could provide a spread. I think, I don't know if you'll understand what all the different line items are, but I can provide that spreadsheet, and I have it broke
we're gonna
down
need an explanation. some
software
sort of
by
narrative.
software, exactly what each one costs by department. Here's what this department uses, and here's the cost, platform by platform. I do have that, but again, I will need help from the departments to support the whys as far as why, or Parks and Rec uses a
A good number of these platforms, we have either A, always had it, or board docs. I believe that was in 2018 that we did some significant survey and tested the different platforms out there before board docs was recommended to the board. Same thing with MyGov. I think that was maybe 2014, 2015. Blackbaud was probably a little later than that. But recently, we have added no new platforms other than MyGov or Board Docs. These are all existing platforms for the city.
I think it's similar to subscription-based stuff now. We all personally accumulate things, and then we forget that we do, and then all of a sudden it gets out of hand. You start to question, okay, do I really need this anymore? So I think that's probably what you're getting at, is really going through by department and saying, are we, for the money we're spending, is it really necessary, and are we really getting the value out of the investment in those platforms? Because sometimes somebody might just say, oh, yeah, well, actually, we don't really use that much and don't need it. It's possible, but, and if,
I do,
Go through during our meetings with
Okay.
Larry, and believe me, there have been other requests that have not been green-lighted.
sure.
Well, and that may be going on, it just
Right.
doesn't raise to our
And-
level.
And we can bring it to your attention.
And then is there a point at which we review these? Like if we've had something for 10 years, is there a review system that is used by the staff to say, oh, we've used it for 10 years, let's look at it. Oh, yeah, that's still, board docs still the best, or, oh, there's some other new program that is less expensive and on board. I mean, there are other ones that, and is there something?
There's discussion out there amongst other cities about MyGov and, how challenging
Oh, it is.
it has been for us. But at a conference I was just at, other cities around us are sharing that they've gone to another user. They never had MyGov, so they had some sort of internal system, and then they went to a new provider. So, the process to change that, especially, for
Yeah.
instance, MyGov, that would be monumental.
Oh, that would, yeah.
And so we would need to do some real good research, bring it back to you all, because you all have been users. You've heard complaints from vendors and residents before we would make a change like that. So we continue to look at that, and when we hear about new things out there, we explore it. And if we can get buy-in, then you all will hear about it either at Ways and Means or the Public Works Committee.
Well, if you're assuring us that you are doing this and that this $377,000 is money well spent, then,
and
just know that I'm going to ask again next year.
I think that's good. I can assure you it's money well spent because Larry and I and others talk about it.
Sorry, I have no more questions.
That's okay. The only thing I want to make a point, and probably come up in other presentations too, I mean, we are operating in a fairly lean, budget, and there are increases of some of our costs this year that we've taken on, that we've committed to, that will probably continue to grow. And so as it relates to hardware, I know it's one thing to budget, and it's one thing to say, okay, our projection is a useful life as X, but what is your approach to evaluating when it comes time? Do we really need to replace these printers and computers and whatever? To your point, maybe it's just a battery replacement on something,
Again, we revisit every printer, the copiers, pretty large dollar ones, the big multifunction copiers in all the departments. Like, they were actually 7 years old last year. We pushed them to this year, which is going to make them 8 years old for 25. We will do it for computers and for, to be honest, desktop printers. I try to take them away. So I always ask, why can't a big multifunction copier be used instead of a desktop printer? But for the most part, I think it's a conversation starter on when a device hits that useful life. And a lot of my questions will go towards, how big of an impact if this device just dies one day and it takes me a month to get it replaced. What does that do to your operations? Is that a big deal if you're without this device for a month? And them are a lot of the type of questions I'll ask when I meet with the departments every year during budget planning. Devices, those are the kinds of questions I ask. Ultimately, hardware fails, and I guess I'm trying to play the game of staying ahead of that and hurting
yeah,
product.
no, I understand.
Trying to do. And some, just to give an example, City of Clayton follows the same life cycle. City of Richmond Heights does theirs in 4 years, and that's, I recommend them to wait longer than that, but they do theirs in 4 years. And so I just, to put it into perspective, that's what I see out there as well.
Thank you.
Alderman Durr? Thank you, Larry.
All right, thank you.
Jump back to fire. Is Chief Cottrell here? Kind of behind the podium from me.
was initially offended that Larry got to go first, but I'm oh so happy now that he got rid of all the bugs for us. So, good evening, thank
Yeah,
you.
that was good to have them
yeah.
happen under his watch.
Appreciate this opportunity. My intent is to go through the slides and then answer the follow-up questions if that is appropriate. So I think I addressed most of them in the slides. So the mission statement of the fire department is providing excellence through service. This is consistent to our strategic plan as well as our vision statement. No changes moving forward. I highlighted some goals to be included in 2025. As we have the past several years, we continue to improve the health and wellness of our firefighters, continue to seek ways to complete that mission. Continue improving technical rescue capabilities, specifically through training now. Our equipment needs are in a very good position. We're just continue through training. Operational decision support through robust data analytics. We look at that regularly. Train select personnel as remote pilots for the FAA Part 107. We currently have 2, so we just continue to seek to get more. Replace and upgrade MDTs in department apparatus. I will get to that. I know there's a question on that item. Replace and upgrade thermal imaging capabilities. Again, I have some good information to share on that. Those items have reached their end of life a couple of years ago, so we've pushed that off. Secure loose equipment for the fire engine replacement, which we anticipate delivery January of 2026. And then place new communications equipment in service, which that has been ordered. We will not receive it until 2025, though. Our accomplishments, we transitioned to a new fire records management system platform. That was a large undertaking by several members of our department. Those funds are included in the IT contractual services budget that you just questioned as well. We did replace the self-contained breathing apparatus, compressor, and fill station. That was our only capital item for 2024. That is fully operational at this point. We entered an agreement for medical direction with Washington University. Is hit the ground running and going very well. We'll also work with our surrounding agencies to deploy new medical treatment protocols with Washington University. That, as well as a very large undertaking, months to get where we are today. We did receive an ARPA grant from the state for the radio equipment, to the tune of $125,000. We are in an agreement with ARC Images to design the new fire training facility, so that is underway. Working with public safety agencies to enhance recruitment and retention opportunities. This continues to evolve. We are days away from launching a website to assist us, and that is for police, fire, EMS in the St. Louis region that's targeting next generation of public safety protectors. My avenue with that is to embed that with the military, get it into their education centers. They're well-trained. How do they get the civilian career path, and we can get them to work? So we've had some success, but that goes live very soon. And that's been done at no cost to the city thus far. And then we partnered with Home Depot. They're assisting in supplies to construct a training course for the drone. Expenditures, these are some of the highlights of expenditures included in the proposed budget. Staffing levels remain the same, and the increase is due to the implementation of the compensation study. Travel and meetings, there's a slight increase. That is for the continued professional development opportunities. I did receive a grant this year for one of the conferences, and we still are waiting on reimbursement. That's why that account is so high, but we just continue to pursue these opportunities for our personnel. The petrol products, we're just trying to meet the market on that, so there's an increase. The education benefit, I think this is great news. We reduced it for 2025 because we had an individual complete a master's degree this year. And there's only 2 requests for education benefits in '25. And then we are encouraging others, because we're going to be seeing some retirement, that gentlemen that have degrees, encouraging others to step up as well. So that's why there's a little bit of difference in the education benefits, because I think it's very good news. Some degrees are being completed. The miscellaneous contractual, the increase aligns directly with the agreement with Washington University, which is $8,000 annually. And then supplies, materials, it was a minimal increase for just inflation, market demands. Update, excuse me, to the critical illness pool. We had our annual meeting in the month of September. Again, tremendous news from the critical illness pool that is very relevant to share here. As of the meeting, there were 115 agencies in the state of Missouri that were participants. The prior year, there was around 80. There was over 3,700 firefighters as of that meeting. State legislature approved measure to expand benefits to include a mental health component within this critical illness pool. Not only did they expand the benefit to include mental health, they covered $6 million to start that program. So $6 million was added to the trust for that purpose. So now the assets of the trust are over $12 million. So for 2025, the rates stay the same per member rate. We do have some additional members that are now eligible that were not before, because if you recall, the first 5 years of service, they are not eligible to be on there. So I think this is very good news. The fund is healthy. The reports are great. And I will add, I have this included tomorrow evening's meeting as well. The largest department in the state of Missouri is joining. I believe it's January 1st, so that will push us to over 5,000 members in the beginning of 2025. So that expands. Additional payments are being made. It's exciting news for that trust. Capital items included in our proposal: replacement of devices and upgrades to MDTs. So we had upgrades at East Central, including the CAD. We currently use iPads, and we are tied to the application on the iPad. East Central, Regis, Motorola, they claim they do not have the ability to alter that application. It has created safety concerns. The alternative is to go to a Windows-based unit, and that's what I've asked to do. I've asked to phase it in over 25 and 26. 26 to allow the new truck to arrive before we switch out equipment in that vehicle. So that is the reason for that big difference for 25 and 26 in device replacement. Thermal imaging cameras. So our current thermal imaging cameras are beyond their useful life. We have pushed this off for 2 years. The good news is the technology has changed dramatically in the past 10 years, and we've shaved $20,000 off that request, and we're accomplishing more than what we currently have today. So I'm very excited about that opportunity. The fire training facility, that as is what the board approved a couple of months ago, and that is the 25 payment for the fire training facility. Then the capital replacement program, the loose equipment for the fire engine, and that is everything that goes on it. The bulk of that price is the auto extrication hydraulic equipment. We're projecting that to be between $55,000 and $60,000 just for that alone. There are, as I said earlier, our technical rescue equipment, we're in a very good position. We have been building that cache for a couple of years. That will move to the new truck. So some equipment will move to it, but others we need to purchase to outfit that truck. I did not update this number here. I did it other places. So vehicle replacement. I'm going to take a couple of minutes here to explain this, if I may. And I'll come back to the change. So I made a request for to replace a vehicle for a command vehicle. I made the request last year because I knew we're in dire situation with used vehicle being in this role. I want to be clear. We do not have a fire marshal vehicle. We have a vehicle assigned to the fire department that we use for support functions. It is used for all kinds of activities, multiple uses. The fire marshal is included in one of them. This vehicle needs to be able to respond to emergencies. That is very critical. I clearly understand there's many priorities in the city, and I clearly understand I want to be a team player. We've modified this request. We are seeking to replace the vehicle that is aged with a small pickup truck at a $40,000 price point. It will need to be upfitted, which at this request, it will be removing equipment off the Dodge Durango and placing it on the new truck, and then we would have this support vehicle. I think that allows us to continue to provide service, and it's obviously a better measure for the city to accomplish that goal for us. I know there was a lot of questions, and obviously I'll answer more if you may have them. Question?
Yeah, I mean, I think you answered some of my questions. I'm not sure when to ask this question, but I think there's this, the concern I have, or the overall comment that I have regarding this budget and this new addition of even though it wasn't maybe a new addition to the budget, it was just sort of revealed, but the replacement program fund. It seems like we're moving a lot of capital expenditures, just moving them into that, and I've got real concern that we're going to spend that down, and then if we don't have that as a reserve, we are going to have issues with, we're going to be back into the same position where we can't find budget for anything. I think I'd like to really know the mission critical elements and try to factor those into the capital improvement plan, the general fund. And then if there are things that come up as, we go into the next year, instead of doing budget amendments, maybe we look at that, tapping into that replacement fund. There's a lot of money for both fire and police, and that's not just a fire and police replacement fund. That's for the entire city. So I guess I'm glad you were able to figure out a way to modify the vehicle replacement. I'm not sure I'm prepared yet to even speak to that. I mean, a reduction of that is good. Thermal imaging, you answered my question about because I actually did have that question, but I forgot to write it down. Before it was much higher request, now it's less, so that's good. Waiting made it less, that's great. So I like the loose equipment and the other parts of that are in the replacement fund. I'm just concerned about that, and I'd like maybe finance director's position or administrator's position on that, but also if we can't afford those replacement projects, where do those items go?
I'll start with the loose equipment component, because when we signed the agreement for the fire truck, that was included in that. And then the truck delays split the year, so we're trying to accomplish that now to avoid 26 price increases.
Yeah.
And that was the cash fund decision.
Right.
Whenever we signed that agreement. So it's really my comment on the loose equipment.
Yeah, and I will speak to the replacement program. The replacement program is designed for the cash fund options that you have made in the past. So those dollars are there particularly for those two items, the loose equipment and the fire truck. So they are there to fund those items, which does deplete it rather quickly, including the phone system and potentially the police's department's request for the body cameras. It is a pretty aggressive, and you're not wrong. Internally, we've had those discussions that say, once we spend these dollars and look at it in this replacement schedule, we deplete it rather quickly. And then we have to make sure that the go-to rate in which we're putting in matches there is a schedule of assets associated with this. We aren't able to just take any of the assets and put them into this type of schedule and replacement. They are assigned to and associated with assets based on their useful life, based upon the internal policies, based upon the evaluations. Do we need them? Can they be pushed back? Can they be moved? But as far as the cash items and what you have dedicated to, such as the fire truck and the loose equipment, those will come out of that replacement program. But it is a concern about potentially the spending patterns. I think internally, the $1.5 million to $1 million mark internally gives us a bit of pause and says, let's relook at the assets, let's relook at where we're at, and make sure that we don't end up in a place that causes concern or the futures can't continue to sustain. The other thing that we're waiting to watch the cycle of are the items in which FEMA and SEMA have purchased for us, which give us some relief in that replacement program where you've been putting the dollars in, but now we don't need to replace them with those dollars. So there are a few components that by 26 we'll have a little better worked out. But as far as cash funding and those items, that replacement program was designed particularly for those items.
So it sounds like the loose equipment is one.
Yes.
Of all
Yes.
all of them that are being asked, like that's one that we probably need to
The loose
approve
equipment
within in the phone system.
And the radios. It's my understanding
Oh.
that you had passed prior.
Prior to this year, the board had, because it's always been in the capital improvement plan, and, we presented it, what year was that? 2 years ago, that this is the way that the city could pursue to fund it, rather than another lease option. Because when we talked to Stiefel, they were like, you were probably spending more money.
Yeah, our credit
going-
rating
going
was
that
taking
route.
a hit.
Exactly, so maybe COPS could be an option, but if you certainly have the cash for it, and we did at the time, why not pursue that option? But, to add on to what Michelle has said, there's no doubt we're going to have to slow down how we're spending the money to replace these capital items. The fact that they are reaching their end of useful life, as we believe it, or as industry practice suggests, doesn't necessarily mean we automatically have to replace them. And so when we go through the 26 proposed budget, we're going to take a critical look at those, and we're going to bring those to you and have discussions about it, so that you realize that, what we don't have in this year's budget and we had last year were deferred items. So next year, you might start to see that again, so that by 27, because we're not saving the money as fast as we need to, because there is no money to save. We need to slow down how we're replacing those items. And because we're having this discussion now, hopefully the department directors are also cognizant of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for us, because I think sometimes year over year, we'll have these discussions and we say, oh, well, here are the items we didn't include because we deferred them and just to make the balanced budget. But sometimes I feel like we do that just to get the balanced budget. Again, something comes up and we really do intend to maybe come back for a budget amendment for that, but we're not really putting it here, or, so I think we just need to be really honest, and we need to be really clear-minded on what are those things that all departments need, what's mission critical for all departments, make sure that we're covering those things, and then those other items, plan for them, but make sure we're clearly stating what they are and where they are, not just hoping that we can come back in a year and find some money somewhere.
You know, we always, and, you know, budget amendments has been something that we've been doing more recently of. We would just forego it. And so when we have savings within the budget, then it's an opportunity to kind of push some of those things early. But I think department directors really do take a critical look at that. But then we also rely on you all asking those hard questions, and maybe some of the ways you ask those questions make us rethink this and say, well, you know what, maybe we can push this off another 2 or 3 years. And Eric just sent us an email as a reminder that, you know, we created this equipment replacement reserve account in 2013. And then in 2015, we really stopped taking a meaningful way to fund it. And so it hasn't been until Michelle is back and, Michelle is here, Gina's back.
Our financial superstar.
Exactly, that we have now taken another look, and based on the useful life of some of those equipment, we are beginning to fund it, because if we had always funded it like it was set up originally, we would probably have more money in it than we do now. So I expect that we will talk about this next year. I expect that you will see deferred items, and maybe the challenge to the department directors is, hey, don't bring any budget amendments in '25.
I will just further speak to this and say that as the finance department develops, this is an item that is requiring our attention. With the hiring of Jim McKay, one of his priorities is the assets and the assets within the system, creating a functional way to look at them, putting them all in one place, and then tying them back to the particular parts of this, and then with Gina's help, finding the funding mechanisms to make sure we are going to start saving at a rate that associates them with the items that are on the list. Part of the other issue of not having a really strong finance department is that not all the assets that, as they were acquired, made the list. So we are cleaning up items, making items whole, and then associating them properly within the system. So it is our first approach at, you guys have been saving dollars. Some of them have been assigned and associated with this. And there are, not just yearly, but monthly, internally, we're talking about the mechanics associated with this. But we're not just sliding random items into the potential program. They are assigned with the audited fixed asset list. We're making sure that's correct and clean. And then any items that are sold or taken off, any items that are, so there is a mechanism behind the scenes that we're trying to make sure, one, we don't leave this in a tough spot in 5 years, that we actually make it function and it can be inherited from other staff members as the city continues to grow. So it is methodical. There is a process, and we'll just continue to address it, but it is sort of in its infancy, but there is a process.
Thank you.
So with that overlay, I want to talk about the truck. So this summer, you and I had a long exchange about the fire training station and things in your capital. I brought this and things in your capital budget you would put off, and you put those things off. They're put off now. This car wasn't in there. This fire marshal car. It wasn't in your. It has not been in your capital budget. And so I'm totally perplexed about how all of a sudden, you know, this summer it was an emergency that was declined, and then now it's in the budget.
I've made the request in prior budget years, knowing that we were going to be in this situation. It was denied. Now we're in this situation. I don't know how else to answer that.
But it wasn't in your capital budget last year, so this is an addition to funding for your department when this summer we made a big leap and are putting a lot of city resources toward a fire training station, which we were led to believe was a really critical and important thing for the department and superseded some other expenses. So, you know, this, what are the uses for this other than the fire marshal and I've heard it drives the boat?
Correct. Takes the boat. It's used as a backup to the chief and the assistant chief when our vehicles are down for maintenance. My car has been in the shop 2 weeks out of this year. We didn't have a vehicle.
So we couldn't rent a vehicle from Enterprise to drive? I mean, that just.
It's not, good point. It's not the ability to drive the vehicle. I have a personal vehicle. I can drive my car. I can't respond to any incident. That's the key that triggers me, is not being able to respond to an emergency. So that is where that request comes from, us being able to respond to emergencies with depth. We have to have some resiliency, so.
So what's wrong with other than the fact that it's old, what's wrong with the current car?
Oh, goodness, the list is long. I'm not for sure the most recent repair, rear end, I don't want to say damage, but wear, transmission wear.
If I may, it had a critical failure? I mean, that came across my
It was
desk.
deemed unsafe earlier. I'm not.
And does it need to be a $40,000 truck? I mean, that just seems absurd. There are other things that could drive the fire marshal, pull a truck, and put safety equipment in. I mean, that's a really expensive truck, and we're talking about potentially next year not being, like, we're still working on this, this capital replacement program and lining everything up. And what I'm hearing, it may not be true, but what I sort of heard was next year we may be screwed. That's sort of what, or, we don't, no, not really screwed, but like we may have things coming up for replacement that we're not going to be able to replace. And so I think we really need to look critically at everything we're talking about buying this year, because we don't want to be in a position where we're not buying safety. I mean, like.
Right. I think my actions earlier this year, the fire training facility, we had one shot at that, and we were successful. And that is, for the next 50 years, sets our department up for success in training. Incredible accomplishment. But I made an emergency request for a vehicle because it's important to me to deliver a level of service. And it was denied. So I've come back. I made a similar request. I need the vehicle. If it's denied, I'm going to bring the request back next year. We have to have vehicles. We have to have vehicles to deliver our service. So I feel like I've gone off the state bid. Took as many options off as we could. We've gone from 73,000 down to 40, and I think that's, it's still a big ask. I clearly understand that. But I also know that what these vehicles cost, and when you set them up, it's expensive, so.
Okay, so I don't know if others have, but I have another question. So in your capital budget, the command vehicles last year were set to be replaced in 27 and 28. And now, all of a sudden, they're in the capital budget to be replaced in 25 and 26. And these are, $75,000 vehicles. So why are those coming up 2 years early?
Again, I made that request last year. It was cut. I'm making it again to try and avoid the situation we're in now. Now, both of the 2020 Tahoes, by policy, are due for replacement. So I'm trying to stay ahead of that curve and not be in a situation where our vehicles are being towed to the repair shop and then we're sitting on for 2 weeks waiting to get them back. That's just mission critical equipment. So that's the request and why they were moved to those years.
But at this point, you've added the Tahoe, you're adding a new car, and you're not asking to replace the
I-
the command vehicles. I mean, there were 2 Tahoes in your old budget,
Correct,
and there are 2 Tahoes in your new budget.
correct.
Um,
So we've had I call it support vehicle since 2006. We've never purchased a new vehicle for that role. It's always been a hand-me-down from either the fire chief or the assistant chief's car since 2006. We've never bought new. That was my intent when I made the proposal last year and again this year, was to do a hand-down to that role. I've been asked to look at that differently, and we did, and
If I can jump in, I know that we often, when we are done with useful life, you know, we put our vehicles on, was it GovX?
Gov deals.
Gov deals. Because many other municipalities can't afford to buy new vehicles all the time, so they're happy to be able to get fairly new or recent, you know, vehicles. If it is a backup vehicle, have we explored the idea of buying one that is on Gov deals and upfitting that? And I mean, yes, I know you take on a risk, but let's face it, most new cars, you have a risk too. There's engine failures, there's transmission failures that happen within new cars. And in fact, sometimes it's maybe even better to get one that's been through a little bit, because you know if it's gonna fail, it's gonna fail usually pretty quick. And so a new car maybe isn't the best thing for a backup vehicle. I just wonder if there's a way to explore replacing that and with something that might be more cost-effective and still get us where we need to be.
I have not. Obviously willing to do so,
I
but
mean, obviously, we're budgeting, we can budget, we're not buying right now. But as
dependability
we-
and reliability, and that's what I'm seeking, you know, to continue to deliver that service.
Yeah.
Just looking at the employee benefits from 21 through projected 27, can you just talk me through the fluctuations? Is that tied to employees coming and going, rate increases?
Michelle, can you explain, please?
And the short answer is yes, it's tied to everything. The employee benefits has the gamut of benefits associated with them. And so depending on the dynamics of the year, if somebody was out, if it was a work comp increase, if it was a medical increase, if they had retirees or family versus single, there is a lot of dynamics that sort of goes into that.
The big component removed in last year's benefits line because we were not showing the families that were paying
Correct.
their portion of the city. So that
Correct.
was the big deduction that took place.
Correct.
Other questions? So I'm going to jump back to this replacement vehicle. I mean, I just don't think this is a good thing to purchase right now. We put a lot of money into the fire training facility this year. We put, I think the other, I mean, we need to buy the fire equipment. We've got to have that on our new truck. The thermal imaging camera is keeping our officers safe. And I just don't think the truck, it's something that we can do right now. I think we've got to really look at this budget. We're spending $1.44 million more on salaries this year. It's 4% more than that. I know capital money's different than other money, so I get that, but I just feel like we're spending and spending and spending, and we're going to get trapped in a few years and not be able to buy an ambulance or a paved streets.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that there's there's a real concern with some of the spending patterns right now, and so if there's a vehicle that is especially since you're wanting to move up the command vehicles. I mean, if there's a vehicle that is still somewhat useful, then I don't know.
Do we need to vote on this, Bola?
To think that you are at a decision point regarding any item in the budget. A motion, a second.
I mean, there are, I know Alderwoman Sims, usually there are other aldermen in the audience if they have opinions
Yeah, are
before we
there-
take something like this.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I should have done that with IT as well. We have quite a few other elected officials in this room. Do you all have thoughts about this? I know there's some other issues that we'll be discussing on the police department that will come to them tomorrow, but no one's coming, no one's jumping up? Oh, Brandon, come on up. Yeah, you got it.
Question, I mean, I agree with the logic, right, but what are they gonna do? You know, if the fire marshal truck is totally out of, kaput, then what do they do if they need to take the boat somewhere?
I mean, is it kaput, or did we spend money getting it repaired and?
We spent money.
Yeah.
It is repaired. We don't know how long that repair is going to last, frankly.
Okay,
It
but
could
we
be-
have spent some money and we
Correct.
have addressed the problem, so it's a functional vehicle.
Correct.
The question is whether or not we know how long that might be functional.
Absolutely. Based off the pattern for 23 and 24, we're on borrowed time. What do? The fire chief's vehicle, the assistant chief's vehicle, perfectly capable of towing the boat.
Mhm.
We've had water rescues because of a water main break. We've had water rescues in ponds and lakes that not even rain conditions. So that's hard to predict, and I can't always be here when that happens. That's what I'm trying to avoid. We've denied taking the boat to mutual aid responses because we didn't have the vehicle right here. I was coming from my house. So
Do both command vehicles have to be, can we stagger and have one command vehicle always here?
So, always, I think
Or-
that's
or, I
very
mean, you know,
dangerous. We operate different functions. The assistant chief always has the drone with him, so I try and honor that because that's a tremendous asset that we typically deploy with water rescues as well. So, we try and come up with a fix there, but it's not perfect. It costs time, and we will figure it out, I assure you.
So is there a motion to recommend removing the fire department staff truck from the?
I think because we have a vehicle now that we've spent money to repair, and I think we should revisit this in the 2026 budget. So I would say we remove it from fiscal year 2025. I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. Are there other questions for Chief, other comments about the fire department budget? Should we let him off the hook now? Chief Spees. Oh, and one or two majors.
Good evening. We're going to go through a brief PowerPoint. I'm not going to belabor you with reading through this.
This one here that's connected?
Okay.
Wow. That
So we
was-
start off with the police department's mission statement. I'm not going to read it to you. Obviously, you can read that on your own. Switching over to the goals, there's a couple things that we wanted to just briefly mention to you. The first one that's on that list of goals is a continued agency succession plan. This is something that's really been prioritized in the last couple of years as we promote people into these different and new ranks that have different responsibilities. I think it's really vital that the people that are underneath them understand those roles and can follow on eventually into their footsteps. So we're working really hard to try and share that information department-wide. The officer safety program is also listed on here. There are several of the elected officials over the years that have come and watched our officer safety training program. It's still a very robust program. We do it quite frequently. We got 4 events scheduled coming up soon. We're lucky in that the Public Works building that the city bought will be a very good venue for us to work and operate in and doing our officer safety program until Dan's guys and gals get in there in a couple of years. So that program continues to go. Implementing this PACE scheduling software, the police department scheduled, we're kind of a complex place for scheduling. 12-hour shifts, we've got detectives working 8s. It's a challenge often to manage vacation time and men and women that are coming and going for their days. So Major Hawkins and Major Simpson did some research, came up with PACE as a scheduling software. We work with Larry Covey on this. It looks like a good option for us as we move forward into next year. In terms of accomplishments from this year, there's a couple things on here. I'm not going to read this list, but 2 things on here that I would like to mention. The first one, completed the intensive review of all department policies. CALEA requires every 4 years that police departments renew all of their general orders, our internal orders. This is a labor-intensive, big deal for us. So what it requires is we vetted each order and went through and took out things that become dated. And we put in new directives, new instructions to the officers, new laws. It's a complex process. We are finished with that, so it was a nice accomplishment throughout the year, and it took us quite a while, almost a year, to get that done, working in conjunction with the lieutenants, the majors, and myself. The last item on that list, the CALEA assessment process. As you may remember, the department's CALEA certified, and every 2 years, CALEA comes back and does a thorough vetting of the department again. So we've been through that this year and moving on in the CALEA process. The next slide just talks to a couple areas in our upcoming budget that we're requesting additional funding, training. Again, I'm not going to read that. That's the reasons for the training budget going up a little bit are in there. Supplies and material, ammunition's just gone out the roof cost-wise, and of course we go to the range 4 times a year, so we do expend a lot of ammunition during the process of doing that training. So that's part of the reason that that's up. Educational benefits, we're requesting a $6,000 allotment for educational benefits based on, there's several officers that apparently are interested in moving on in their education for next year. Education, by the way, and a degree is tied to their ability to be able to take promotion tests, and it does weigh on considerations in promotion. We talked with Bola and Michelle and Eric about this asset forfeiture fund. As you know, the asset forfeiture money is allotted only for law enforcement. Because we had officers that were assigned to the DEA task force several years ago, there has been money that's been trickling into this account for the last 2 or 3 years. Just recently, we got another nice check of in excess of $100,000. So that fund is over $400,000 right now. So it gives us the opportunity to do some things that we'll talk about later in the meeting. And one of the things that we're doing this year with our asset forfeiture fund is purchasing new firearms. So it's about a $46,000 expenditure. I think it's a really good spend out of that money. And I'm going to ask Jason Simpson to come up for just a minute. Jason? Jason's going to give you a 2-minute tutorial on why this weapon system was purchased this year.
So this was kind of spawned out of necessity. When we hired our 3 new park officers several years ago, we went to the vendor, which was
our current platform, which is Sig Sauer. And at the time, they could not fill our order of only 3 guns, whether that was a military contract or whatever it was. So we started looking at other options. In that option was, there were, I believe, 4 other manufacturers that were tested. We took those guns to the range with our firearms staff. We tested those. We talked to the vendors. We talked to some other firearms instructors in the area, and they also recommended that we explore a red dot sighting option. And I will say I'm in law enforcement 27 years. I've used iron sights all those 27 years. My eyes are probably not as good as some of our younger folks, so I was hesitant to look at that. But I did test one out at the range, and the statistics on those are they are 35 to 40% more accurate as a sighting system, and I can attest to that because when we went through the falling plates on the range, I usually miss 1 or 2 of those, and I hit every one of them. So that was one of the things that our current platform does not allow for. We currently do not have a slide, which is the top of the gun, of the receiver on the gun, that allows for that sighting system to be mounted. And at the time, Sig Sauer also told us that they could not sell us just those slides if we chose to update to the red dot system. So what we did is we did some testing. We ended up with a Walther platform, which I consider a very good platform. It's a cheaper platform than a Sig Sauer. It's a, in my opinion, it's much safer. When I was with the city, we had a double action only firearm, which means every time I pull the trigger and it shoots around, the hammer comes back to the rested position. The firearms we carry now are what's referred to as a double single action firearm. When that first round goes off, it ejects that spent cartridge, the slide comes to the rear, and the hammer goes back to the cock position. In order for us to go back to the holster after shooting 1 round, we have to hit the decocker on the side of the firearm. In my opinion, in a very stressful situation, that can be detrimental if you go back to the holster and you accidentally hit your trigger. That hammer is already in the back cock position. So this is a striker-fired pistol, which means everything is internal. There is no external hammer. In my opinion, I think this was a safer platform. It is a cheaper platform, and it allows us for that better sighting system.
3 minutes of gun knowledge you probably didn't know. Thank you, Jason. On to the capital items. I'm going to ask Angie Hawkins to come up in a second to talk about the police department's request of a capital item to switch over from our current Panasonic body-worn camera system to the new utility body-worn camera system and talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of what we're dealing with Panasonic. But before she does, I'd just like to talk to the other 2 items on here. There's a lot of conversation about what we're going to replace and when we're going to replace it, trying to stagger these things out. I've talked to BOLA multiple times. As you know, the fire department and police departments put in for grant money to buy new radios. The fire side got money. We did not. So we are sitting and we have more radios, car radios and miniature radios to purchase than the fire department did. So this is a big number. This is a lot of money for us. So you're looking at somewhere around 52 radios total. Is that about right?
Total with the cars?
Yeah. So it's around 52 radios collectively. Motorola is expensive, and they're really the only game in town. So this is a big capital item request, and as we talked to Michelle and Bola and Eric about it, we are okay with stretching this out. These are really good radios that work very well at this point, but they do break down. Chunks of them are starting to fall off. So when they do, we're replacing what we can. Some of them we have to down and put out of service. Jason Simpson's radio went down this year, and Motorola will not fix these old radios. So what we're asking to do in this capital item request is just kind of put a Band-Aid on this to some degree and get 6 radios so that we have those radios available when these go down, and they are going to start going down in the next number of years, even though they've been super reliable for multiple years going into this. So that would allow us to have 6 dependable new radios with warranties and a guarantee that those are going to be good for us. That's why we're asking for the 6 instead of the 52 radios that we probably are headed to eventually downstream. So The break room renovation,
Can I ask a question
sir.
on that?
Sure.
When we price those out, are we paying a premium for just buying 6, or
there wasn't much of a price difference between 6 and 52.
okay,
That they don't give you much of a break. There's a little, but not much. It wasn't, when we looked at it, it wasn't worth looking at a large purchase. I mean, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars for these radios.
Yeah, it's a
I mean, I
significant-
think the most recent number that Angie and I came up with was near $500,000 for total for those radios.
Yeah,
So it's a lot of money.
450
Yeah.
plus,
That's what it was when they quoted it. It just continues to rise, so.
okay, so.
That last item, that break room renovation, just to be clear on that, was an asset forfeiture request that we made this year to, obviously, to upgrade our break room, which is 20-something years old now. Unfortunately, in the asset forfeiture rules, we were unable to pay for the installation piece. We thought Public Works could install these cabinets and things that we were gonna buy. They couldn't, so we have to go out for that, and that's what this cost is. So it would be, we've gotten estimates for it, it's around $15,000. If we purchase the equipment through asset forfeiture, which we are allowed to do, then a contractor in 2025 would be hired to do the installation. That's what that is. Angie's gonna come up and talk to you about our body-worn camera request.
Is that being shared? Okay. I just wanted to,
Maybe increase the size down at the bottom a little bit so it fills the width. A little bit over, right? A little bit, yep.
better?
Yep.
So I want to speak, I'm sharing right now a memo that we drafted back in July, I believe, of this year, and we brought to Public Safety. And it is explaining our request for this new body-worn camera system. And I'll use that term a lot, so please know that when I'm talking about this system, it does include in-car video as well. It's the same system. I reviewed some of your notes, Alderman Gould, about your questions that you had about this. And one of the things that you brought up was, is this mission critical? So the reason I wanted to bring up this memo is because what we were able to do here was we were able to show what we have capabilities-wise currently with our platform with Panasonic and what we could have with the utility platform. Please understand the reason for requesting this isn't, oh, hey, look, we want this brand new shiny toy. The capability here in this technology is capable of mitigating the failures in human performance that we experience in law enforcement, especially when we consider critical incidents. If you think for a second back to 2014 and you imagine the benefits as I discuss them, please picture in your mind's eye how things might have gone differently had we had the technology that is now available to us through the new platform, but not through the platform that we currently have. The first few things on here, we talk about CAD integration and we talk about geofence activation. I'll break that down because that's a lot of stuff that might not make any sense. When our officers receive a call, the computer-aided dispatch sends them to a specific location for that call. With Utilities platform, what we would be capable of doing is integrating CAD, right? So their location, where they're going, to the camera system. When the officer enters the geofence that has been set up around that location, the camera automatically turns on. This takes away the onus on the officer to, under a very stressful situation, potentially remember to turn that on. It can seem pretty silly. Well, how easy is it to turn on a camera? Well, it's super easy as we sit here in this room. Very, very difficult outside on the streets under high stress and duress. And that's not something that speaks to the officer's capabilities. That's something that speaks to human capabilities and human performance. So a lot of these things have been scientifically backed when you look at the value that this is going to bring in. You talk about that value and the thing we don't have now. The holster sensor activation, which as you'll see is the fourth item down on the list, is something that I can't put enough emphasis on as to how invaluable that could be. In a lot of situations, and we probably have 30 or so, I'm just generalizing, uses of force per year. It is a use of force when an officer retrieves their firearm and uses it to gain control over somebody. In each of those uses of force, in a handful of situations, we look back and we say, where's the video for this? There's no video for this because so-and-so pulled up on the car clotters as they were going through a car, and they immediately had to draw their weapon. Obviously, that takes priority over turning on the body-worn camera. With this platform, that's eliminated. With this platform, the technology is such that the holster sensor immediately kicks on the body camera when the officer's firearm is retrieved from the holster. You think about that in terms of 10 years ago and all of the stuff that we've seen since, and you think of how well the city would be positioned to mitigate any of the fallout from an incident of an officer-involved shooting or even a complaint against an officer for a bad use of force. And it puts us in an exceptional position one way or the other, right? Best case scenario, it puts us in a great position to defend our actions because they were correct. Worst case scenario, it puts us in an exceptional position to be transparent in the event a mistake was made. And that's what our community asks of us. That's what keeps us out of the news. That's what keeps riots out of the promenade. And I can't emphasize the value to that enough. Our current system has none of these things you see here on the first page, and we'll scroll down to the rest of the capabilities as well. But we cannot live stream into these cameras. When you start running as an officer, which happens all the time, it happened today. Jamie Clark got punched in the face and sent to the ER. She's fine. But you do that and you start running, it automatically activates with this new stuff. We don't have that. Immediate video access, it uploads immediately. Every 2 minutes, it uploads to the cloud. We have to wait currently for our officers to take the body-worn cameras back to the station, place them in a docking station, and for that video to upload. A lot of, it's pretty easy to look at this system that we have now and think, you know, that's weird. It's only 4 years old. Why in the world would it need replacing? Wow. Here I am speaking of technology. I hope you guys take me as an expert. Here we go. When you look back those almost 5 years, a lot's changed. Utility has brought this platform and this technology forward that just wasn't possible then. And Panasonic isn't offering anything comparable to it, nor is any other vendor that we can see. I mentioned already the docking stations for uploading and charging. That can become an issue, which we've seen with some of our vehicles actually. When vehicles got into accidents, we had to physically crawl into the back of the vehicle, over the glass, over the whatever was broken, and pull out the card so we could download the video. Wouldn't be an issue here, or if any damage occurred to a body-worn camera. The back end of things for the operability of this new system is exceptional as well. Is that very selfish of me to be pleased by that? Sure, I'm the administrative major. I respond to sunshine requests. I respond to requests for video for discovery and other court proceedings. Currently, what I have to do if I have to redact video is to sit down, open up a different platform, download the video, upload it to this new platform, get in there and do my redacting, download it to my desktop again, re-upload it to this software. All of that redacting and all of that editing is done within this system. It's all together. So we could eliminate what it is we use as a separate entity for redacting. We could eliminate what we use as a separate software program for video reviews and audits. That can be done in-house as well. It streamlines things on the administrative level exponentially. The classification piece is really critical here too, because what happens when an officer classifies a video means what kind of call did you just respond to, right? With CAD integration, what they can do is, oh, I already know. Me, the camera system, I already know they responded to a stealing. I already know they responded to a domestic disturbance. The computer classifies that as such within the camera system. Now we're relying on the officers to do it. If they forget, if they don't get time to do it, if they accidentally hit the wrong classification, it could be retained, not as long as it should be. And that's critical stuff, especially in my role and what we should be providing for the folks who need those things or want those things with those requests. The product comparison, the easiest one I could give you in terms of hardware, is that this new one is a smart device. So 2024, almost everything is a smart device. What we have now, not a smart device. This new piece of equipment can be charged like a cell phone, can be charged anywhere, and it's worn underneath the officer's uniform shirt or outer-facing garment with a single hole in it for the camera view. The ease of use operationally is exceptional. The chance of it getting knocked off and not capturing critical video doesn't happen. And that's just a couple of those things that we could have that we don't. I wanted to really quickly touch on some of the other agencies that have taken on this platform recently as well. St. Louis County has had this platform for at least 2 years now. St. Louis City has had it for over a year. St. Charles County has had it for almost 2 years. Bridgeton recently got on board. Creve Coeur to Pear, Maryland Heights. I won't read all these to you. Of note, Richmond Heights went to this less than 2 months ago. Also of note, Clayton is going to it either in 25 or 26. And there's a reason these departments are going to it. And it's not just, oh, look what we have, it's a shiny new toy. Please don't misunderstand the request. It is because it can position an entire city to protect itself when something terrible happens in law enforcement like it tends to do. If there's any questions or if the chief has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate one of her points. In a situation where an officer doesn't turn a camera on for whatever the reason, and something happens, you can imagine what the criticism is going to be of our police department in our city. They did it intentionally. This eliminates that human piece, which was the #1 draw when we started looking at this. I think it's important just to reemphasize that. You have any questions about the system?
No, when I asked my question, it's because I obviously didn't have this background. So
Sure.
Thank you for putting it together. I know it was a memo that was done back in July, but, it was one that I didn't have. So it was very helpful, and it is, when I asked the question, this is the type of a response that I'm hoping to hear. And I think that, there's a lot of really value to the upgrade. The question was, what we have is a body, it's not like we didn't have body worn
Sure.
camera. We have
Sure.
all of these things, and they weren't that old. So the question was, is it really reached its useful life? So thank you for answering the value and the benefits that, real tangible benefits and the security that could come from it. Because it's a smart system, this is maybe, did Larry leave? Is Larry still? Are there, you talked about some systems programming software that we currently need that may be obsolescent or if we took this on. Are there increases of IT costs that go along with this that aren't captured right now at least in the costs to the city here, or are those in the IT budget already?
So I can definitely let Larry speak to that. I do know that the storage for this data is cloud-based, not server-based like the one we have currently. We did have to purchase, I believe, a new server entirely for this when we implemented it a couple years
Original
ago.
one,
But
yeah.
Yeah, we did. We actually purchased 2 servers when we originally implemented, because there's so much data on it, we didn't have enough storage on our backup platform to back the video up, so we bought 2 and basically clustered them together so they're replicas of one another just for data protection of the video. So that would go away. And then I think what Angie was speaking towards, there's some pieces of software, right, that we would not have to renew that we currently have. There's the frontline body-worn camera auditing and software, and I think this was the other one. Tracking would be built into this system, and we could subscription for U.S. Fleet and that GPS tracking that we currently pay for separately.
So, I mean, to that point, I just want to make sure that when we go, if this stays in and moves forward, which, I'm hearing all of the benefits of it, I'm supportive of it, because there's some real good safety things, and Chief, the things that you brought up are very important. I just want to make sure that we're accounting for all of the software, does everything go in the cloud base and all of these new systems and all this new smart capability? IT-wise, have we accounted for all of these things and then removed things that we don't think we'd need when we decommission the old system?
Yeah, I think ultimately, we definitely will remove these. I've already, these particular line items, if you look at future years, I've already zeroed them out, and they're not in the budget, like, beginning in 2025, yet they're
Okay.
in the estimated 2024. And if anything, going cloud-based is less of a burden on IT. I mean,
Sure.
there's just not data we have to back up. There's not servers we have to manage and maintain and patch to run the system. There's not docking stations. Yeah, we usually give a 7-year useful life server, so, you know, there might be a little bit left in life of that, but we would, the point is, and that, if I remember right, it's been 4 years ago, I think that was around a $25,000 purchase for those 2 servers, just to store the data, when we originally bought this.
And does that old data get archived and moved into the cloud storage, or do we have to retain 2 servers just for ability to go back, historical access to?
The demo that we actually received from utilities said that our old data could be uploaded and archived, and that's exclusive to the stuff that would need to be retained. So that would meet the, obviously, the Attorney General's guidelines for retention, et cetera, and that could be accomplished, yes.
Because not all video is required to keep.
Correct.
And then I assume from a security standpoint, obviously, these are very sensitive, this is very sensitive data.
Yes.
You know, when I was doing my training and we were looking at the system we have, one of the benefits was that it's a closed, it's our server, it's not nobody can access it, right? Cloud-based, I'm sure what are the security measures that they've put in place to protect the data?
I know that they have to be CJIS certified, which is Criminal Justice Information System certified. That's a national standard through which any law enforcement data collected is regulated. So they've met those standards already. They're actually working on AI technology to incorporate with this system as well. That would also have to meet those standards.
Okay.
Other questions?
Are you finished with your presentation? Are you at the question stage, or are
Let me
you-
get out of this.
Okay.
I think that's it, isn't it? You have another slide?
That's it.
That's it. That's all we had.
Great. Do you have other questions, Alderman Gould? Okay. So I just have 2. Major Simpson mentioned the guns with the gun dot system, and then with this camera, it's a related question. So the guns with the red dot system are being purchased with asset forfeiture funds.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
But then, what's their useful life, and then where's, like, maybe this is a question over here, where's that money come from? Does that capital money that then would replace those? And the same thing with the cameras, what's the
Are
useful
you
life
asking
of
how
these
long the weapons are
how
expected
long
to
the-
last?
yep.
Yeah, Jace, do you know the answer to that?
Our current platform, we have what's called a Trijicon night sight. That's a glow-in-the-dark sight. The useful life of that is usually 10 years.
Okay.
It would be similar when we purchase these new pistols. They would still be night sights. However, you would have the red dot technology as well, that what they do is they co-witness. So if something happened with one of the sighting systems, particularly the red dot system, you could still use your iron sights as backups, and they would still be required to be glow-in-the-dark sights. So it's normally about a 10-year
About a
process.
10-year, okay, and great. And then what is I know the last set of cameras did not last that long. if
And
they
to be very clear, the functionality of these cameras for what they're capable of has lasted. What they are capable of is, as you saw in that comparison, just not up to the standard that we need to protect, you know. So the functional life that they were warrantied for was 5 years, which will be up next year. The new system also has a warranty of, you can choose between, I believe it was 5, 7, or 9 years, depending on what kind of coverage you wanted. And past that, we don't know just yet.
Can I ask a question regarding the cameras? Are they eligible for resale?
I don't know.
Panasonic system?
Oh, the Panasonic ones?
Yes.
I think so, actually. Our Panasonic rep mentioned that because they reached back out about re-signing, and I said, we'll have to get back
I
to
was
you.
going to ask that same question.
Perfect. The other question that I have following Alderwoman Tice's question about the guns, they wouldn't fall into the replacement program because we don't track individual guns on the fixed asset list.
Right.
They probably track them in in their department for those purposes, but as far as the guns themselves, they would be a capital purchase, but not within the replacement program.
Okay, and then I guess I do have one third question. So the, when looking at your capital budget, there aren't just a ton of things in there. So I'm wondering if there are things that are missing in future years that ought to be accounted for and thought about so that those can be thought of and evaluated along with all the other city priorities.
Radios are the big one.
Okay,
Yeah,
and
we
that looks like
mentioned
it's
that.
in for next year, but I didn't know if there were
That's-
other things and.
Typically, you'll see 4 vehicles on there too. That's typically our request every year is 4 police vehicles. We took that out this year intentionally for a couple of reasons. We had the FEMA money where we got 3 extra vehicles this year, so there's not a really necessity for that next year. And then also the, lost my whole train of thought, wouldn't you know it?
We already had purchases in 2024, I believe, that were approved, and then you received the FEMA vehicles.
Good, okay, that's all I have.
So then, you know, when, when Alderwoman Tice says there's not many, there's no capital improvement, seems like, but other than the replacement program, we don't think for the next 5 years, we're gonna need to be replacing vehicles, is that what I'm hearing?
Vehicles,
Vehicles
will,
were,
yes.
Vehicles, yes.
are they in there?
They're in here.
They're in there, yeah.
Okay,
The building that we're in is in good shape. We don't see anything really big coming at us in the building at this point. Yeah, it's.
oh yeah, here's the police cruiser,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
I-
it's there.
And then, of course, further down the road, when we do start to see end of life for the cameras, which would 5, 7, however many years we choose in terms of warranty, we would also have to have that discussion and put those in those forecasted years.
Thank you.
Okay.
Alderman Berger?
Chief, earlier you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation, cost of ammo and that going up. Obviously, that's very sensitive to elections and election cycles. Are you guys able to, I guess, time that out to try and buy at the lowest point? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Typically, we make an order a year. Honestly, it's just really where it depends on the, where the cycle is for the cost. It's be an interesting thing to do for the administrative major to explore that a little bit and see if there
Very,
is.
very excited, very excited.
If there's a better time to buy ammunition, I don't know. I can tell you I bought a box of ammunition today and it cost me $50, so it's just stupid expensive.
But if you wait a little bit longer, it might be a little bit cheaper, but
Yeah, potentially.
We usually use a company called Gulf States Distributors, and they're a nationally known company. They have a giant warehouse down south, and in my 27 years in law enforcement, they've always been the cheapest for many, many police departments. So what you see on the retail shelves is not necessarily what we are paying for a department price.
Especially when we buy in bulk.
So there are other elected officials in the room. Does anyone else? If you'll come up to the microphone so the viewers can hear.
How many cameras? Each officer would have a camera, and each vehicle that is assigned to patrol would have a camera. So if I am doing my and you'll want a couple of extras just in case of critical failures, I think we would be at 30 body-worn cameras, and we would be at 10 in-car cameras. Thank you. Sure.
Do you all, I'm kind of going off agenda, but would you all like to just stay and finish doing the new business items?
I don't have the agenda in front of me. Which one's first, ma'am?
The traffic enforcement vehicle?
Okay, so we have made a request, this is an asset forfeiture request for consideration of a vehicle to help us do traffic enforcement primarily. There would be other uses potentially for the car, but this, we've gotten a lot of complaints, neighborhood complaints about traffic. So we're trying to do as best we can with traffic enforcement at this point. Today was no different than a lot of days in our life in the police department. Mike Collins, the park guy, walked into the station and said, I don't have a car. Currently, we've got 3 cars in sick bay. One of them's a Tahoe getting a new engine put in it. It's going to be gone for 3 months. So the point being, on the day watch, cars are a challenge. The detectives are working, the retail person's working, the command staff's working, everybody's there. We had 5 persons working on shift patrol today, so cars are a challenge on day watch. That's the reason for the request. As we, and Alderman Gould, you'd like me to speak to your questions, I'd be happy to kind of address those at this point. In this memorandum, we asked for consideration for an electric vehicle. The honest truth is, I'm not exactly sure which direction that the elected officials would like us to go. We're happy with either one. We just need a car to do these details. The cost of the electric vehicle is similar to the Tahoe. So it's expensive, more expensive, I guess you'd say, as a smaller car. But that's just the cost of buying an electric vehicle. They're higher than what we were paying for our gas-powered cars. You would get a cost of savings for fuel. It's difficult to put an exact number on that, how many gallons of gas that this car in particular used 8 hours a day would go through. But I can say, I can speak to this car, if it works well, that we would keep, there'd be longevity for it, meaning we would try to keep this car in the fleet for a few years. When Dan comes and Dr. Dan looks at our cars and says this one's ready to go, doing his evaluations, I think this electric vehicle will probably be looked at or treated differently than a typical gas-powered car because of the fact that it doesn't have as many moving parts. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if we're allowed to do an electric vehicle from the policing side, how it does. That's part of the problem. There isn't much data, there isn't much information, and there isn't much background on these cars. So our request is to use asset forfeiture for the purchase of the vehicle. But we really honestly don't care if it's an electric vehicle or the other. We can work with whatever that the elected officials would ask us to do. We're fine with that. We would like to stay in that realm of a Tahoe, Durango. We've had real good success with our Tahoe so far, other than the one that's looking for an engine currently. But they have been, up to this point, reliable and have, the Durangos are a little rough when they hit 75,000 miles for us with the abuse, but they're good up until that point typically. A lot of the issues that, to your point earlier, Alderman Gould, if you have problems with a new car, you typically know it fairly early, and they're under warranty, but that doesn't mean that we're not without a car for a month while they're trying to fix it. So that's always a challenge. But that's what this request is to fulfill the opportunity to be able to do details, particularly our traffic detail that London Brown, Officer Brown's out doing on a daily basis at this point. Just this week, I think London's up around, between warnings and tickets written, he's up around 50. So it's really, we will try and sustain that program as best we can to protect the neighborhoods for the complaints that we're getting. But that's where we are for the request for this card. If anybody has any questions or comments on it.
I mean, I guess, I did ask quite a few questions. I think in general, we need to probably look at having a bigger conversation about where we all are as it relates to the electrification of the fleet and what departments make the most sense, what departments don't make the most sense. Your point about there's just not enough data, that's kind of my biggest sticking point. It's so much in its infancy, and it is a premium. I think that I'm not sure it really gives us better performance or, and there's a lot of data that is out there that's coming online now that's suggesting, even at the 5-year mark, you're still not better off cost-wise. It's a cost. As you extend past that, okay, sure. There's new technology that's coming out. Toyota just announced a swappable hydrogen tank that could really revolutionize and especially for police cruisers and public works vehicles that are higher demand, aren't relying on plugging it in and having battery, but swapping a cartridge out and you're back out. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see some significant jumps. Battery-based EVs are maybe not where it ends up. And I'm glad that there's movement. I'm glad that there's innovation. I'm just not sure it's the right time yet to put one in a police department. That's how I feel.
Let me clarify some things first. With the asset forfeiture fund, do we have any on the horizon, any other critical expenses coming up that we would need to use out of this fund, Chief?
The only other thing that we're looking at is the kitchen renovation I spoke to earlier. And that's
Right.
about a $60,000 expenditure.
And we're at 400,000 on the balance.
Yes, sir.
Alderman Gould, I look at this as a good opportunity to maybe experiment with the electrical vehicles, not only for this department, for the other departments, and with how we're limited with the use of this fund. I'd like to know, and maybe I'm looking at it, tell me if I'm looking at it the wrong way, but what do we have to lose with experimenting with this if they don't have any other critical needs coming up?
Well, I'll jump in. So I'll jump in with this discussion, but then I have a question that's a step above. So on this discussion, if the decision is made to purchase this vehicle, I agree with Alderman Erger that I think this is a great vehicle to make to make an experiment. It's a daily, it's not a 24/7 vehicle, and it gives the department an opportunity to test and see the features and see if this is something that might be workable in the future. And then just as an anecdote, I know it's an anecdote, it's not studies, but we've had an electric vehicle for 5 years. We have put new tires on that vehicle. There has been nothing. You don't take it in to change the oil. You don't stop at the gas station to get gas. You pull it in, you plug it in, you're done. So the ease of use is great. But I know that's just an anecdote and it's not a study. But my question though is, you sort of mentioned it, but like, why did we have people working now? You have officers. Why does the traffic enforcement officer need a dedicated car? It just seems like an extra car that the city may not need to use, even though the money's coming from asset forfeiture. And then it's another vehicle that at some point we're gonna have to replace, and there may or may not be asset forfeiture money to do
It's a
that.
struggle every day on the day watch to find a car. It's that simple. I can't explain it to you any more complicated than that. Day watch, night watch is fine. We have 4 or 5 cars out, right? It's the day watch. We have all our detectives typically working. School resource officer takes a car to the school, has to. Our parks guys take their police car down to the park when they're down there. It's an important piece of what they're doing now, in particular because it has a mobile ticketing in it, so they can write all the parking tags that they've been doing down there. So the detectives, you just keep going down the list, and you go out in the back lot, and if we have 2 or 3 cars deadheaded, there are no cars there. And that was the case today. So this is just, through asset forfeiture, it's a way, and maybe we get that blessing that you just described of 5 years of free service. I don't know. And then you have a residual value to that car when it's 5, 6, 7 years old to replace. We don't really know what it might have higher value than a gas-powered car. So it's necessary in order to run these details, because we just don't, there'll be days when London comes in and you won't have a car, and that doesn't make any sense. So that's why we would ask to buy it. The asset forfeiture piece, to Alderman Erger's point, it's north of $400,000. We can afford to do it. And if we get into the electric vehicle piece, that's fine. If we don't, that's fine too. It's more really the need to do the operations of the police department. This one in particular is designed specifically to try and have safer neighborhoods through traffic enforcement. So that's why we asked for it.
And from a platform standpoint, it makes sense to have a smaller sized vehicle for in and out of, residential streets and all of that. Are there other options? I know I had asked about the potential of the hybrid that Ford puts out, which would give us the fuel economy or the fuel savings over time and then the ability for
looked at the-
reliability. But I know, you know, you have some concerns
Yeah,
about
the
that.
hybrids have not performed well. So I don't hear anything negative about the electric police vehicles at this
Well,
point.
they've just rolled out, so.
But they just haven't been around much. But the hybrid, people are not buying.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it just doesn't hold up.
But
so.
are there other gas-powered vehicles that are smaller than Tahoes and Durangos that could potentially be used in this situation?
Sure. So of the pursuit-rated vehicles on the market, the big three obviously have their products. So you have Chevy, Dodge, and Ford, basically, and we're kind of still at the mercy of these manufacturers and what they have available.
Right.
So we spoke with Chevy, we worked with them over the summer for the allocation of those 3 Tahoes, and we were lucky enough that they had some in. I did also at the time, however, I reached out to Ford and I reached out to Dodge as well. Kind of wanted to be thorough with what our options were and what we could realistically get in a good time frame. And Ford, for the last 4 years, has consistently been either out of stock or to order them would take in excess of 4 or 5 months. And that's my only issue when I go through and I do these orderings is I'm at the mercy of the manufacturer. So to get a car and get it on the road, get it operational, obviously it's prudent to kind of get what we can get as soon as we can get it out on the road. And we've just had a little bit of a struggle with that since COVID. So it really depends on what's available for us. But we are looking at those 3 manufacturers every time we go through and to do a purchase. I will say also Chevy is the only one that has a PPV-rated electric vehicle on the market as of right now. But that's just kind of the struggle.
And that's really, when she called it, a PPV-rated vehicle is a pursuit-rated vehicle for law enforcement. We can't put a car on the street that's not pursuit-rated, and that there are very few that are out there, so. There are no, that I know of, there are no smaller SUVs like a Escape or one like that are PPV-rated where you could actually put them on the street and potentially get into pursuit, so.
So I see other elected officials in this room who may have opinions on this. Is there people who would like to come to the microphone and speak? Can you come up here, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Well, watchers can't hear. You can stretch your legs.
Hi.
Do we have the charging capability over at the station? And is that factored in the cost?
Yeah, so the 8-hour charge of this vehicle can be done with the lesser charging process. And again, if we stick to it being an 8-hour a day car, we can stick with that. If we put this vehicle, and we may end up, you know, maybe 2 years from now, that's a decision we make. We look at this and go, hey, it's really worked out well, the maintenance is super low, let's push it. Let's run it into regular patrol and see how it performs at that level. We would have to upgrade the charging system at that point. Right now, is Dan here? Dan, can you just give a brief overview of what the lesser charger would cost, if you know?
Have a handheld mic for.
Yeah.
Wasn't even a level 2, it was less than that.
So just a 240. Like, are you thinking just a 240? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not. I mean.
If it gets charged overnight, this is what Chevy's saying, if it's charged overnight, that will suffice.
Yep.
And it'll charge it.
I think at the rec center, I mean, if you could.
Yeah, we could always take it to the rec center if we had to, yes.
So I know this is going to public safety tomorrow. So presumably, public safety will dive into a little bit more whether this is a needed vehicle. But do we need action on this? I mean, I guess can I make a motion since I'm not really chair, or am I chairing it?
Yes, you are chair tonight.
Okay, so I guess I can't. I mean, I would suggest a motion to move forward with an electric vehicle being purchased from the asset forfeiture funds following discussion at the Public Safety Committee about the necessity of the vehicle.
So moved.
I mean, I don't want to limit it to, I have a problem with saying we're going to purchase an EV. If it's opened up to, we're going to budget some money to explore and make those decisions, then maybe I'd support it, but I just,
You know, one thing that I spoke with Chief Spees about is, so when it comes time to replace this vehicle, who picks up that tab? Is it the capital, or is it asset forfeiture? Will it be reevaluated at that time? Or should we set aside funds now so that we have some money in asset forfeiture to replace it?
and
Just
it's
a
important to
thought.
note as that, as it relates to that, the resale on these will be nothing. I mean, it'll just be, we're not gonna get, like we did get for other vehicles that we resell, we're not really gonna get anything out of it.
Sir, we're just looking for direction on which way the board would like us to go. We're not tied into the electric vehicle. We're not, this is really a vehicle request that, we included the electric vehicle as an option, but that's not, we're not
Yeah,
absolutely
that's what I'm,
tied to it.
that's kind of what I'm getting at. What I'm hearing from you is you want a vehicle, it's a vehicle request. Whether it's an EV or not is insignificant to your decision. Your department needs a vehicle. I'm fine with a, you know, a motion that moves forward to have a discussion about the vehicle request and then keep the, what's actually purchased for a time of decision, you know, and whether or not that's available, practical, reasonable, but it seems to me that your department needs a vehicle that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be this particular one.
Okay, let me try again. Since that motion failed, how about a motion to move forward with a new vehicle for the police department to be purchased with asset forfeiture funds, with the approval of the Public Safety Committee about whether this vehicle is necessary, and before it gets in the final budget, that there will be a discussion about how this car will eventually be replaced, whether that will be asset forfeiture money set aside or if it can fit in the capital budget.
Let me confirm, this will come back to the board before final approval, no?
Yes.
Correct. I'll make a motion to move forward with the vehicle purchase for the police department for traffic enforcement, subject to additional cost analysis that we can review at the board level.
What
And
analysis
going
do you
to-
want?
Electric vehicle versus gas-powered vehicles. And then we'll make a final decision at the board level on which vehicle at that time.
So it's going to public safety.
Public safety first.
Right. So depending on what comes out of public safety, is there a placeholder, and then before they actually do the purchase, it comes back to the board for discussion, or do you want to wrap it all now? We're limited as to time. Unless the chief
Alderman-
says you can do it.
We have some hands raised in the,
Do what you tell me, ma'am.
yeah. I think we should wrap it up so they can know what they're gonna
Yeah.
buy. Brandon or Alderman Weggie, would you like to come to the?
Kirkwood and Webster have had police EVs for 3 years, right? Have you heard of any problems?
I have not.
The Detroit Police, they do a full evaluation of all PPVs. You know, the Bolt has scored very, very high in terms of performance and usability, you know, so I feel like the data's out there. We have the AMRA report that says we would save somewhere between 14,000 and 35,000 depending on usage. I realize that's full day, you know, so that's gonna go up and down. The savings are here. I think your request is the Tahoe and the Chevy are the same price with the upfitting. General Motors does the upfitting, so the car's been designed from the ground up to be a police PPV, so it's all connected in. It's not a third party that's doing it. I mean, this seems like a no-brainer to me, absolutely. And also, one other thing, I know it has a 3-year, 36,000-mile warranty, but the battery has 8 years, 100,000. That would be the biggest cost savings. So, I don't know. And then also I asked for data on what we sell on Gov Deals for our internal combustion engines. We're not getting that much, so.
It looked cool,
Okay,
too.
that seems like the mayor wants to come and speak too.
just procedurally, could not this committee tentatively approve or recommend a placeholder for a vehicle? That vehicle be either internal combustion or EV, up to whatever amount, $60,000, and then wait to see what public safety just says tomorrow.
Which is what I tried to do with the
Right,
memo. I was
and then
just-
if public safety green lights that, then we could have a thorough discussion at the Board of Aldermen when they take up the proposed budget. Whether or not whether or not to go ahead and do that, whether it's an ICE versus an EV. Have that discussion at the full board.
Perfect.
That would be
And
my
that's
suggestion.
That's great. That's what I tried to do a minute ago, but it didn't.
That's what I was suggesting. I
Yeah.
would be for up to $60,000 dollars pending recommendation of the utility of the vehicle and whether or not it's necessary from the Public Safety Department, committee.
Just for clarification, on page 165, the asset forfeiture account is 10,221,6485. Currently, for 25, there's a proposed 25,000 in there. You want to increase that by 60 for further conversation? Because this will be general fund dollars because it's coming out of your seizure account. So increase the line item by 60 for further discussion.
Could I interrupt you for one
Please.
second? The purchase price is around 58,000 for
Yep.
both the Tahoe and for the EV.
Yep.
But there's an outfitting cost of these
You're
cars.
correct,
So
yes.
there's, what,
So it's more than 60?
well, the
What's-
outfitting
You
cost
went
is around
73?
14?
Yeah.
The upfitting cost for a brand-new one, and it would vary. It would vary if we're talking about one of the traditional vehicles versus an EV. We could expect a little bit higher cost on an EV for customized parts and versus the regular gas-powered ones, but anywhere from 9 to, I think 9,000 is actually the quote we got for the Chevy EV, and which isn't too terribly bad, but we would also have to consider adding a computer, a radio, and a ticket printer, another camera, and those other things that make the police car function as it should. Those are additional as well.
Yeah, normally the upfitting costs run around right around $13,000 for
we
upfitting
usually
in
budget
police and fire
15.
at the moment. So make it
That's also included in the asset forfeiture. You can expend asset forfeiture for that as
so
well.
potentially a $75,000 placeholder and that account in the general fund on page 156. It is asset forfeiture, but it's within the general fund conversation. It doesn't, because he's got a capital line item in there. In asset forfeiture, that's correct. Asset forfeiture is not associated with the capital fund. It must sit in the general fund, and it has its own fund balance. So we
So
do.
it's a separate fund
It
balance.
is a separate fund balance, and you can see that, I
At
believe.
the bottom of 156.
Yeah, on page 26, you can find it as its own fund balance, and we have to report it separately as well.
Yeah, and I guess that's the concern that I have is that I don't know that we've got all of the full information about the costs and the implications of it, and, you know, and I mean, I think we move this forward to, you know, all of these discussions, but when it comes to the board level, I would expect we would have a very detailed breakdown, because if we approve now 60,000, well, that's not enough, you know.
So
And if we start pushing toward 80,000, you know, then it's like, okay, is that getting, for a vehicle that may or may not be used all the time?
It'll be used
are we-
consistently, but again, the Tahoe, the purchase of the vehicle is very similar to the Tahoe. I think it's
No,
about
I understand,
$1,500.
but what I'm saying is that if no other department vehicles are, what'd you call it, sick bay? If they're not in sick bay, there's gonna be this car's gonna sit, right?
Well, no, it'll be
Or another car's gonna sit, because
Well, some
this
other-
would be an
yeah.
additional vehicle
Right.
that right now is not tied to an additional personnel. And then we've
Correct.
got additional, insurance, we have additional, I mean, so, you know, there's a lot of additional costs that come with a vehicle that may or may not be used, even if if it's a replacement for another vehicle that's sitting because it would have been used before. You understand what I'm saying?
Today, we had full staff, meaning all three of our park officers were here, et cetera. For our park officer to come in and say, I don't have a vehicle, what he was telling me was the three of them didn't have a vehicle. So to put the three of them in a vehicle together was a little silly.
Well, yeah.
But just to clarify, it would kind of put us at a whole place. So if we were full staff like we were again today, everyone would have a vehicle.
Okay.
But, and without one sitting, which is better than we are now.
Okay, so we've been talking about this a long time, so let me
Yeah.
try to move this forward. So I think I heard a motion to put a placeholder in the budget coming out of the asset.
In the general fund budget.
The general fund asset forfeiture.
Capital expense.
Capital expense.
Correct.
For up to
75.
75,000 for a vehicle, and then the decision about electric or non-electric will be made at the full board, pending public safety's agreement that this is a necessary car.
That's my motion.
Okay, fine, we got it. Is there any more discussion? Surely not. Okay. All in favor?
Say
Aye. Okay, I think let's move on to the lieutenants.
So the next request in October of, help me out, Bola. When did we talk about it? Yeah, it was the prior year. Bola and I had a meeting about a year ago regarding the adoption of the rank of lieutenant in our police department. As a chief in the police department, I would tell you that law enforcement doesn't need less oversight, they need more. So that was the reason why I went to Bola and said, I think we need to look at this lieutenant rank to further professionalize our department and create this accountability that we were looking for. She agreed to it.
So it was actually approved in the budget.
Right.
So it wasn't just Bola approved it. The board
You
approved
started
the
it, though.
budget.
She
I
started
want to
it.
clear that up.
She's the first thing I got to go to. Anyway, when she agreed to it, then it went into the budget, it was approved, and then we promoted a lieutenant, and then ended up promoting a second lieutenant early this year. So the job descriptions are included in your packet. The job descriptions for these two officers are pretty complicated. They have grown into, along with what was assigned to them, to be what is basically first responders along with the other members of the command staff for incidents that happen in Brentwood. You may say, well, there aren't that many, or it is a little Brentwood, but they have responded to active shooters, which happened in Alderman Erger's neighborhood. They have responded to protests. They've responded to flooding events, which happened at night in our park area next to in the business park. So there are multiple times when both the lieutenants are called to scenes, and having a department car with them is advantageous. They also do a lot of training in Brentwood independently, so it's not like these guys are riding in a car together. They can't share a car because they're often here together. While their shifts are staggered, there are hours where they're here together. That ability to be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week can be a real challenge for all of us. I've been doing it a long time. It's a drain on anyone that does it. So that's part of this equation. And I think the last piece is, as both of them look at the training events, that whether it be the range or our officer safety program, both of them use those vehicles and lock boxes in the vehicle to transport weapons and equipment that we use in training events regularly. So what we've asked, as I talked to, initially when I talked to Bola about this last year, she agreed to it, but now that as we look at it, she's suggested that we ask you, the elected officials, to consider changing the handbook, which the section in the handbook refers to fire chief, fire assistant chief, police chief, and majors, and we are asking that it be amended to commanders for our department, which would include the two lieutenant that we have at that rank.
Okay, I'm going to start on this one. I think this is completely a discussion that needs to be had at the meeting tomorrow night, because I feel like that is a public safety issue. I think the issue for the Ways and Means Committee is that this means we're adding 2 vehicles to our fleet, plus if this other vehicle that may or may not be necessary that's now we're looking at for traffic enforcement. So I'm assuming these are older vehicles that
They are, yes, ma'am.
And so now we have 2 more vehicles that aren't in our planned vehicle replacement. Aren't these vehicles that were going to be sold? When we,
Potentially, they could have been sold, yeah, but eventually, yes.
so I guess my question from a Ways and Means standpoint is, if we keep these cars, what's the vehicle replacement policy going to be for how did these cars fit in and the car that we just talked about? So I feel like that's the Ways and Means decision, and the Public Safety Committee needs, it's, I don't think we need to sit here after being
So
here
it's-
this long to talk about the
Yeah.
value of the lieutenant's change in
So the answer to your
responsibilities.
question about the number of cars is the same one that we gave you about the traffic officer position. If you have 2 lieutenants at the station and you take away 2 of those cars, they have no cars. There's nothing there to drive. So if they want to go do a training, or they're responding to a call for service, or whatever it is that they do on a daily basis, and it's a lot, they will not have a car if those cars are taken. So the function, the mission of that rank really cannot be completed unless, I mean, they're not going to ride bikes around town doing their trainings. It's not, and there'll be, just like today, there'll be plenty of days where there's no car available for either one of them.
So am I mistaken that how did it work before? Am I mistaken that these are new vehicles? Like, I sort of feel like we're getting 3 new vehicles.
They are not new vehicles.
Like in the
When
total.
they were replaced, they should have been sold, but it was kept.
But new to the department. So the department now potentially will have more vehicles, which is a Ways and Means issue because of a replacement.
Right. Yes, I think you're correct.
You're right. I had Dan. Dan, would you come up? Because Dan did, I think him and Eric Lake looked at the list of assets that the city has, and were able to determine what the number of vehicles that the department is expected to have and how these 2 fit in. Do you want to speak to that?
I know that we did the evaluations on some of the police vehicles, and to your point, there's 3 that were purchased through FEMA. I'm not sure what the total is anymore with the fleet. Eric might know, since we do the maintenance on them, but, there's, I want to say 18 or 19. Yeah. Yeah, including the chief and majors.
That includes 18 is including the UTV that we purchased.
And the
with
K-9
asset
unit.
forfeiture, and the K-9 truck that was purchased through the.
Yeah.
So the policy as it stands hasn't been amended to include the K-9 vehicle, which is a take-home car. So when we take another look at that policy, that has to be changed. But also, there are individuals, the lieutenant that the chief mentions, that were approved in the 2023 budget, that are considered command staff because they're white shirts. So now they have a take-home vehicle. That is not mentioned in this policy as well. So that's why we're trying to make sure that our practice matches the policy.
Okay, so from a Ways and Means standpoint, I think, like, now we potentially have 4 cars, because I forgot about the K-9 vehicle, that we have either purchased or are talking about purchasing that we don't have in the replacement policy. So, I don't know if we need to relook at the replacement policy. Maybe we need to be keeping these cars longer. I don't know what the sale is at the end. I know some of the police cars around town get a ton of like they stop and go, and the command vehicles go back and forth to home. So maybe those cars need to be kept longer because they don't have the stop and go.
Last time
I don't
we
know the
looked at
answer,
this
but that should
policy-
not be necessarily an
Right.
issue we can deal with tonight.
I don't remember which committee did the oversight of this, but it may have been Public Works Committee. I think it was, when Mayor Dimmitt was chair of, was it Ways and Means? It was Ways and Means. So it's coming back here.
Everything comes to this committee.
I
Sorry.
mean, I guess, in addition to the concerns Alderwoman Tice raises, I mean, if these vehicles are, again, going home with the personnel and then, how does that impact wear and tear costs? How does that impact, is there an increase in insurance cost if they're being driven as a personal car essentially to their home? There's added cost in insurance. There's an increase of fuel costs probably because, they don't live locally. So, I just, and then I'm concerned about extending this for lieutenants for the police department, and then, okay, what does that mean for the fire department? Do those lieutenants now decide that, that, I want to make sure we have again, clearer picture of all of the costs, all of the implications before we make policy changes like this. I'm not arguing against your ask that they may benefit out of it, and there's a value to them to do it. I also am concerned of why didn't we have these conversations when we talked about reclassification? Like, none of this came up, and now this is another sort of implication of the reclassification that we didn't talk about before, which is fine. It just seems very close to the time that we just had the reclassification. We could have probably dealt with this.
So it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, we're going to let the Public Safety Committee discuss the, whether or not the lieutenants, it's a policy decision that ought to come through their committee to the full board, is what I'm hearing. And then, goodness knows, because now it's going to come back to Ways and Means, but I mean, I think if it was when Mayor Dement was chair of the committee, that's been, 5+ years since the vehicle replacement policy has been looked at. And certainly, as we're trying to look at doing replacements, we should probably relook at that policy for all the departments in the meantime. So,
Ready for the next one?
yeah, let's keep going.
My last one, I promise. So we were requested to put together the proposal for the security upgrades to this area of City Hall. As you might remember, the police department in April of this year came in with the elected officials and just kind of went through the volatilities of what you do and this room and this building and what maybe we could do in terms of upgrades. Some of this stuff is pretty expensive, and so we had a meeting right after Bola asked us to look at this again. The commanders sat down and really looked at this, and after we were done dissecting it, we made a recommendation in the memo that I believe is attached now to your board docs. So in short, what we recommended was a portable metal detector, the cost of which is probably somewhere around $6,500. It depends on the model that you buy. Deployed at the front of the building, occupied by 2 police officers who will check people coming into the area for weapons. That would require a 3rd officer then at our meetings that would sit up here with you guys. You got to have 2 at the metal detector, and we can't have this area empty. So it would require to have our meeting staff with 3 officers total. The other recommendation that we had was this door behind you is to put either remove the door or add a push bar so that you can have egress out of here in an emergency situation if you need to, but that door remains locked so that no one can come through that door to your rear during a meeting. So what we didn't recommend, although it was on the list originally, was trying to put some version of bullet-resistant material at your base. So as we talked our way through it, it's really, I think we had to make a decision on, in terms of level of security, where the metal detector and 3 officers, along with me and anybody else that's in here from the police department on typical nights, what level of protection that gives you, and is it really necessary to go a step further? Our opinion at that point was, let's do the metal detector, the door, and an extra officer, and evaluate and see how it looks from there. I think if we did those things, it would elevate the security here to the point where I think that all of you would be comfortable. I hope.
I mean, obviously, security for staff and elected officials is very important, and we certainly don't want to have anything tragic happen like we've seen in some other places. I guess we don't have a lot of people that attend in person for most meetings. You know, and so would the extra officer or extra personnel be required to be around for the entire meeting or just for entry and then, because overtime costs for extra personnel seems excessive for something when we rarely have a meeting that has a lot of people that come
The
in.
challenge that you'd have with regard to your question, the challenge you've got are stragglers that come in here 20, 30, an hour after the meeting starts. If you shut down that metal detector and take the 2 officers off that front door, you've pretty much opened up the door, so to speak. So we would have to deploy the metal detector throughout the entirety of the meeting for you and keep the officers there with one here. That was the plan. That would be my recommendation to you. I get your point, though. I think you probably saw in the memo, there's a cost to the overtime piece of this, so.
Yeah, it's
Right.
not cheap.
No.
And then it takes officers off of, that's the other concern, right? It takes them away from the community when they may not be really necessary here. The additional officer is what I'm saying. And then, I understand, so the material that you talked about, there's certainly an initial hard cost to that, but there's not an ongoing cost like the overtime and.
The installation of that material is expensive as well. It's not just the bullet-resistant material, it's getting it in here
But again, I would
successfully.
like to, if we're gonna take this up, I'd like to kind of see all of those things that we discussed and just make a decision on what is the best investment to mitigate safety problems that we might have. I just
That
think,
list that we gave you was really what we discussed, and those are the options. I mean, we've looked at other municipalities in the area and nationally what the issues have been. So those are the go-to options for security. And it's,
and how many other departments, any municipal, our comparator cities or surrounding cities, how many of them do this?
I believe, Clayton, does a metal detector process. It varies, and some of it depends on the area that they're in. So it really depends. Honestly, most of them are relying on officers being present at the meeting. So spending the money on a metal detector process and the overtime is, it's a significant upgrade, but there's a cost of doing that business.
Yeah, I appreciated the session that we did and the workshop and the awareness that it brought to staff and elected officials. The door seems like a no-brainer. That one seems to be pretty simple because I know that that's not something we can constantly monitor. I think the addition of having officers here and especially when they sit near the dais, I think those operational changes has helped make me feel a little more secure, obviously, because of some of the things you guys have brought up. I'm curious as to everybody else.
I'm stuck, to be quite honest. But at the same time, no one's life is it's invaluable
That's
to
right, yeah.
to these costs, and that's what I defer to. I'm willing to make a motion to move it forward, knowing that the board in its entirety will discuss this later on, and I truly want to hear their perspectives too. So that's where I stand.
Second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Okay, let's move back. We've been here a long time. Let's move back to admin and E EDST. No, but I won't be here, so I was trying to get the, or do you want, yeah, or do you want to stop? I mean, we can stop. I mean, would the two of you like to go ahead and finish this so
I
that
mean,
the
if-
next
if-
meeting is follow-up? Or I'm happy to stop if you are, if everyone is exhausted and would prefer to defer this to a meeting where it should be shorter. I will leave it to the others in the room.
I'm fine to move forward as well, since you're not going to be at the next meeting, and this should be relatively short.
I think these will be shorter, but I could. Usually not for a committee, but yeah.
Upload all these presentations, all the presenters for this evening